I would like to begin our panel session today by introducing Dr. Tauheeda Yasin Martin, who is an associate professor at Northern Virginia Community College and teaches courses in religious studies, humanities, and global affairs. Her research interests include issues of poverty, race, criminal justice, and comparative legal systems. Her work also focuses on pedagogy and culture, oral communications, and critical reading in the classroom. She earned her MA in Islamic Studies from the University of Wales, Trinity St. David, in the UK, and has previously worked with the World Bank Group in Washington, DC, and in the New York City public school system. So, Dr. Tauheeda, I'd like to turn over the floor to you, if that's all right.
Yeah, thank you, Angus, and thank you all for being here. Thank you, Gary, for putting this together, giving us a way to connect about our research and our teaching, especially during these times. So I'm going to share my screen. There's some audio, and if for whatever reason you're unable to hear it, please let me know. So this is I'm going to talk a bit about a project that I do in my Islamic studies courses, and also transcends into other courses as well. But it's a podcasting project, and so during the pandemic, when our courses switched over from face-to-face to Zoom, I decided to keep the project, and this was sort of a test in how this would actually work, but it wound up working out really well, actually. And so I'll talk a little bit about the project and some of the themes and the topics from the course, from the podcast presentations, and then I'll talk a little bit about the sort of specifics of the project. So this is a semester-long assignment that I give to students. It's student-led, so they focus on their own topics, and we work on a process of narrowing down topics. But for me, the whole point of the podcasting project is both the process itself of coming up with the topics and the themes from the course content, and also the product, right? So at the end result of having an actual podcast episode. So I'll talk a little bit about the process and then the product, but I see podcasting as a tool for engagement with course content, especially in the Islamic studies classroom. I should give you a profile of my students. The majority of my students tend to be, working students. Many of them are first-gen students. I have students from all over the world, lots of students from even refugee backgrounds. I'm in Northern Virginia, which is right outside Washington, D.C., in a community college. And so we have a very diverse student group that comes from many different places. And I wind up usually having a good mix of about half the class being Muslim, half the class being non-Muslim. And so this gives us a really rich opportunity to have conversations around the themes of the project, of the content from the Islamic Studies course, with students who have really varying levels of their understanding. And so from this particular project over the last 2 semesters, I got a really wide range of topics related to Islam and Muslim identity. One of the recurring themes was obviously the pandemic. And so I had one group focus on vaccines and the sort of Muslim response to pandemics in general. I also had a group of students talk about the hijab and their own Muslim identity. We had conversion, reversion, and then a really interesting conversation between a group of non-Muslim students. And because the mosques here were closed, it really provided an opportunity to have interviews between non-Muslim students and Muslim students about Muslim women in particular and their experiences in mosque in the U.S. So these are just some of the themes that came out of the last 2 semesters, and I'll talk a little bit about each of them. So with the first, actually, before I do this, I'm going to give you a look at the platform. So I use something called Anchorfm, and it's basically a very self-explanatory tool for podcasting. I'm by no means, someone who has tons of experience in podcasting, but the app has made it really accessible for both me and the students to engage in this type of discourse. And so I'm gonna play a quick clip, and then I'll give you a bit of the audio from 2 of the different podcasts, so you can have a chance to hear what the students themselves have said. And please let me know if the audio is you're not unable to hear it.
Especially at home too. My parents, they saw it as like, I don't know, bro. They saw me. They really thought I was about to be a terrorist, bro. Like, especially my mom, she was so shook. And
so in this particular episode, I had a group of students interview one of their friends who converted to Islam from Latino background, which was pretty interesting for the students to hear just what the reversion process was like. And I'll play a clip of, let me see, back here. This is a clip from some students who were talking about COVID-19 and vaccines. And what they did was they actually interviewed Muslim doctors in the area, and they reached out to different contexts they had in the medical field to discuss the Muslim perspective on pandemics, as well as whether or not they would get the vaccine, which I thought was a pretty interesting conversation. And in the end, they took sort of this onus where they actually encouraged people to get vaccines. And this wasn't something that I, directed them to do, but it was interesting to see just the direction they took this particular topic in.
This is a pandemic podcast.
My next significant talk. Hello, everyone. My next significant talk. Hello, everyone. I will introduce my classmate Fatima. Hello, Fatima.
Hello, Shakila.
Did you take the vaccine and why?
Yes, I took the 2 doses of the vaccine according to the recommendation of my doctor, as I have high blood pressure.
What is your recommendation for other people?
My recommendations to the people to take the vaccine and also continue to wear masks, wash hands, and keep the social distancing.
Thank you, Fatima.
You are welcome, Shakila.
So that was just a little clip, and the full actual podcast will be up soon once I've done editing it. And then we also had the topic of hijab. And so some of the issues that the students really wanted to focus on were this idea of being foreign, more so than the specifics of wearing hijab, but the sort of othering that happens. Quite interestingly, they talked about there being more freedom in the U.S. than in some Arab countries, and then they again took some onus and started talking about tips for others who struggle, so specifically Muslim students struggling with hijab in the U.S. And so this whole idea of authority and stewarding, which is part of the theme for this particular conference, was something that I found interesting. This idea that the onus was on them to take the theme, but then also to expand upon it by offering this sort of stewarding aspects. So I'll play a clip of that as well. Sorry.
Hello everybody, welcome to our podcast. My name is Shema, and today we're going to discuss a very interesting topic. We're going to discuss hijab in America. But before we start our conversation, let me give you a general idea about hijab. Hijab is an Arabic word meaning barrier or partition
of that likely are there is some that difficult and get struggle with it. So Marwa is when thank you so
Only Muslims have the practice around and hijab that get struggling in here. I just want to say, even if you are struggling, the moment you decide to put it on for God, you will feel a huge amount of happiness.
environment. So as we all know, experiences vary. There is some women who did not find it difficult to wear hijab in a non-Muslim country as America, but there is some others that find it very difficult and get struggle with it. So Marwa, as a hijabi person, do you have any tips or advice for a woman that wear hijab in America and get struggled?
Sure, Shaima. My advice for a Muslim woman is that no matter how hard it is or how the friends and family think about, we must obey our Islam. And if there is problem in one place, they can move to another place. If they are struggling how to keep the hijab because they are in minority and feel different in environment with friends or in parties, they should remember that it is an obligation and blessing and should not forget their identity and beliefs because of the living environment. For some people, it is hard because they did not practice early, but it is never late and it will be natural once decide. They can do the same things as others do while being covered, like doctors, nurses, teachers, gym trainers, and so on. They should start practicing on their children so it
Tauheeda, I think you're muted.
So thank you. So I talked a bit about the whole process of podcasting, and for me, and what I found for the students is that the process is actually more important at times than the final product. It's been useful as a tool for helping students, especially to synthesize and summarize content. So when we went over for example, the theme on hijab, you know, they had to look at the Quran, they had to look at hadith, they had to go through all of the different sources that we used in class, and then synthesize that information, summarize it. And so I find that the podcasting offers a good tool for that. And then also the self-reflection aspect of it, especially I think in the Islamic studies classroom. I teach intro classes, and so these are for students who are, you know, not religion majors necessarily, and they're taking it for credit for another major. And so approaching it from an academic perspective at times can be, I think, there's a fine line, as I'm sure many of you know, between students who are kind of unsure about how to approach studying religion from an academic perspective in the classroom. And so having, you know, this type of tool where you have a discussion where students are going through the different actual facts and you know, themes of the course, but they have this sort of reflexive opportunity as well. And I find that the exchange between Muslim and non-Muslim students is really valuable in the classroom. And interestingly enough, because we had Zoom and students were able to turn their cameras off, that sort of anonymity actually lended itself well to this environment, because I think there was less fear, you know, of sort of the looks when you had a comment. And I found that students would actually speak up a lot more, interestingly, which I didn't expect. But I think having that anonymity factor with the technology actually created some positives in this space, at least from the teaching perspective. And the discussions we were able to have really vibrant discussions. So that's the process. I wasn't too concerned about the final product. I know, students, I didn't want them to have any anxiety about having to have this really perfect podcast put together. It was more so about the process for me. But, the end result was, the students did a really good job of organizing themselves, and then also really integrating the content and having a good time at the same time. I got lots of great feedback that it was a really great project. So I'm open to questions, discussion about the logistics. If you're interested in learning more about how to do something like this, perhaps in your classroom. Like I mentioned, I used the Anchorfm app. There was also other communicative tools, so Slack and also the discussion board. I had a very clear rubric, which I think helped students organize how to create the podcast in terms of the structure. And, I'm here if you have questions or you want to talk more about how to do something like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your paper. Really, really interesting to see that kind of combination of pedagogy and some of the topics that your students have been talking about. Thank you.